So I was listening to Raoul Paul, who's a pundit and YouTuber and social media influencer, investor, wealthy investor in his own right. And again, I love a lot of his material. I consume a lot of his material. I agree with a lot of his stances. I think that the best way to get rich very quickly now, within a few years period, is going to be these new crypto. Indeed, it's going to be these new meme coins. He also talks a lot about macro investing, and that does tie in a lot with geopolitical investing. Geopolitical investing is basically macro investing, simply focused on geopolitical factors, demographics, the way countries react and behave with one another, as well as what governments are doing. And so we do have a lot of convergence. Where I disagree with Raoul Paul is he has subscribed to this religion of AI. And his idea is that AI, within the next, say, 5 to 10 years, is going to surpass the IQ of the average human by a multiple of 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. So it's going to have like a 1,000 IQ, he says. And therefore, knowledge is going to be free. Knowledge is no longer going to be a scarce commodity. And therefore, he says that there's going to be no way to understand rationally markets anymore. He says you have 6 years. I like that, by the way, because I want to get rich within 4 to 5 years. He says we have 6 years to get rich, get economically situated. He calls it un-F your life. Because after that, there's going to be no rational decision making. And I know that Raoul Paul has studied a bit of Austrian economics because he debated Peter Schiff, and he demonstrated some knowledge in that regard. He knows Austrian theory on currency and money because he used the argument beautifully to advance Bitcoin, which I agreed with, by the way. I think Bitcoin is the new gold, has a lot of aspects of gold without many of the drawbacks. I also still believe in gold. He is saying that we're not going to be able to rationally analyze economics anymore, therefore no one's going to be able to make money. But I want to ask Raoul Paul and remind him and remind those who accept his thesis. Anytime humans act, the laws of economics do come to the fore. For example, economics assumes that we do not know the future, that the future is unknown. The only time that action is possible is in the present. So there's a real present, and then there's a future. Now, if the whole future is known, then that would be true, that there would be no space for these ideas. But if the future is known, then the future is the present. And if it is all known, then no action is possible, because all action is carried out in the present to affect a future outcome. So just the fact of there being a present time and a future time would mean that economic laws will apply, there would be exchange, there would be economic cause and effect, there would be a market, and there will be market prices. Now, how different would this be? Let us assume that we make contact with a UFO civilization, and there are now aliens in the mix, and aliens are owners of all of the corporations and so on and so forth. Economic law would still apply, we just have to factor in these new exogenous factors that are in the mix. But Raoul Paul makes it seem like no rational behavior would be possible. Well, if no rational behavior were possible, we would no longer be living beings. Any living being, by definition, any living rational being, must act according to that rationality. So it has to be that there would still be markets and market prices. So I do not believe in the deification of this AI and the singularity that he's talking about. No, I think the market will continue on well after the 6 years that Raoul Paul postulates. Raoul Paul says knowledge is no longer going to be scarce. Knowledge is going to be free and ever present. And our current economic models depend upon the fact that knowledge is scarce, that is not evenly distributed. And this is a whole can of worms that I could go into unceasingly. And of course, we don't have the time on this show to do that, so I'm going to try to address it just very briefly. But first of all, let's say not only knowledge was non-scarce and abundant, let's say that every single resource was non-scarce. And of course, again, Ludwig von Mises dealt with this proposition not this year, but in the 1940s. When he was writing Human Action, he talked about the fact. Let us assume that we lived in the land of cocaine, and the land of cocaine was this mythical land where we were in a paradise and that everything was just abundantly available. Let's say you didn't even have to get up to eat. Someone would just come feed you your food, or let's say a robot will just come feed you your food. You can have Michelin star meals made by your AI robot and so on and so forth. There would still be scarcity. Why? Because there's still a limit to the number of things that you could do at one given segment of time. So, for example, just based on the law of contradiction, you cannot ice skate and swim at the same time, because to swim would assume that you had water, and to ice skate would assume that you had ice which was frozen. So those are almost logical contradictions. You can't do that at the same time. You'd have to ice skate, let's say, for 30 seconds, then go for a dip for 30 seconds. So there's scarcity right there. You still have to decide what you're going to do in any allotment of time. And people have different desires. Some people want to do ice skate in that segment of time. Some people would want to swim in that segment of time. So they're going to have to make an exchange. They're going to have to give up one thing to do another thing. This is Austrian Economics 101. They're going to have a preference, and they're going to then have to choose based upon the number of factors that are there. I hope you understand me just a little bit. So even assuming that you have no scarcity, there will still be human action. Therefore, all of the laws of economics will apply. Therefore, there will still be markets. There will still be rational analysis. There will still be rational action. So let's just take Raoul Paul's assumption that knowledge will not be scarce. And I don't believe that anyway. Because, for example, when I get on ChatGPT a lot, and when I use it, it is often incorrect. It is often empirically incorrect. It often gives me broken links. Of course, that's going to improve and so on. But the first mistake in saying that knowledge is not scarce is analogous to the water and diamonds paradox in the economic community during the 19th century. They said, why is water cheaper than diamonds when water is more necessary than diamonds? And the mistake is assuming that these are homogeneous entities without division. So knowledge is not a homogeneous entity. There are portions of knowledge, and there are grades of knowledge. For example, one piece of knowledge might not be as high quality as another piece of knowledge. For example, let's say there's a piece of knowledge that's only probable. There's another piece of knowledge that is apodictically certain. Now, we could say that only what is apodictically certain is knowledge, but that's getting pedantic. There are pieces of knowledge. So, are we going to say that every single piece of knowledge is, first of all, going to be distributed in the same way at the same time? There's no way that it's going to be evenly distributed. And as we talked about in another podcast, even if there was a perfect piece of knowledge distributed to everyone, every person who received that piece of knowledge would act differently. Therefore, it's not a commodity. In fact, I would dare say that, let's say the sun is in the sky is a piece of knowledge. If I receive that proposition and Raoul Paul receives that proposition, those are two different pieces of knowledge. Why? Because we're both going to react differently to those pieces of knowledge.